The status quo. The status quo could be a deal killer that's probably plaguing you right now, and you may not even realize it. On today's episode, we're going to talk to you all about the status quo and what you need to do to fix it. And yeah, you do need to fix it. Check it out. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another great episode of the Sales Evangelist Podcast. I'm your host, Donald C. Kelly, the Sales Evangelist, and I'm so excited for another great episode. I'm so excited to be here with you today. And on this episode, I have the one and only Will Barron. He is the founder and the brains behind Selling Made Simple and Salesman Podcast. You can find all the details about that in the show notes. He runs a great podcast as well as an organization helping individuals like you and me when it comes towards improving our sales game. On today's episode, I get a chance to talk to Will about his experience with the status quo. This is something that holds a lot of people back. Make sure it makes a lot of deals stale and stall. And when it comes to it, in the end, just falls off the pipeline. He's going to break down what are some of his experiences and then how we can go through and break past the status quo. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, I encourage you to subscribe. We share all kinds of ideas that can help you to improve your sales game, help you to build pipe, and help you to close more deals. As we dive in, you get a chance to learn a little bit more about what the status quo is, get Will's experience, and then also see how you can easily fix this. Simple. Check it out. Will, welcome to the show.
I appreciate you having me on. I'm looking forward to having a chat with you.
Of course, man. I'm looking forward to having the Salesman Red here on the podcast and to be able to talk some of these things up. We're bragging a little bit about you in the show in the opening of the episode here and about some of the major accomplishments that you've had and so forth. And I feel that this is going to be a fun interview. With that being said, we want to dive straight into the sucker when it comes to the status quo. Status quo is a problem, Will. In so many different ways. You start off by, you think you have an amazing deal and you think this prospect's going to work out great. You put so much faith and hope in this thing, and then all of a sudden the deal doesn't work out. And it has absolutely nothing to do with the competitor, and it has nothing to do with your price. It's just there's a problem that you didn't quite figure out, and that's the status quo. So I want to talk about that today. Before we jump into it, Will, take 1 second. Tell us a little bit about what you do right now.
Right now, I'm the founder of salesman.com. That may or may not change in the not too distant future, which is a conversation for another time. But yeah, I help B2B salespeople find and close more deals in the next 30 days. That's our shtick. We do that by making selling simple, and that's what I'm all about.
I love it. So, Will, let's talk about this. The status quo idea. Why don't you go into that? What exactly is status quo? I mean, I kind of set up the framework there for us.
Well, I want to echo something you said earlier on, where salespeople feel like they're progressing, they've outbeat the competition, but the competition in most complex B2B deals is the status quo. People inherently, and we could talk about perhaps the psychology behind it, and that are kind of growing up and evolving in tribes, and we can go deep into the idea of the status quo. But it's essentially this feeling that we all have where we just can't be bothered, where there's got to be a bigger perceived reward, like a massive reward, to put in any effort to make any progress towards anything whatsoever. And the cliched way of looking at it is when people are overweight. And you go, well, if you just do a little bit of exercise each day, change your diet just slightly, 90 days from now, 120 days from now, you could transform how you appear, your appearance. But people will go, well, I could just have that Kit Kat right now. Or, I'm going out on Friday, so I'll start 2 weeks from now. That happens in complex B2B sales as well. And the more complex it is, the less people want to risk their own neck. They want to buy in a group as opposed to progress the deal on their own, if they can. And typically salespeople are dealing with prospects that are too low down the food chain who don't have the actual power to get the deal done as well. And when you combine all of that, you end up in this position where the person knows that they probably should implement this product or service. They know that it is the right thing to do for the business, not even long term, medium term, slightly longer than short term. But in the short term, they'd rather just plod on and see if something else happens, or see if they can just show up to work, get paid the same, and not take all the risk and the pressure that may come with a impactful change in the business.
That's fascinating that you shared in that way, and I've seen that before in so many different instances where my coach used to call them the Seymours, the people that can always ask to see more information. They're a Sandler coach, and it's like one of Sandlerisms. But they can always ask to see more, but they didn't have the capability of saying yes to it. And the other part to that, too, that you pointed out is this idea as well about the putting my neck out there. That political clout is so much more, I think it's so impactful, and many of us don't even pay attention to it or realize it. We're just thinking, yes, this prospect they need our services, but that political clout may be more important. My job at 250,000 or 300, whatever they're making, maybe it's more important than me solving a problem that, yes, could help the company, but right now it's been working very darn well. And if this goes wrong, then Donald Head is on the line.
And a lot of the time, it isn't working well. It's just working just good enough that you can survive till next quarter or next week. Just good enough that you just keep plodding along. Even though the stress might be building, the pressure from external sources, market forces might be building, but you could probably go a little bit further, and then I'll deal with it next quarter. That is the status quo that most salespeople are familiar with.
Do you have any stories of examples from whether it's a client or people that you've worked with that tied to the status quo, like describe it in a way that you just shared there?
I have it every single day. I will book calls with VPs of sales who want the team's training, and the conversation almost goes verbatim every single time of, how's the team performing? The team's performing fine. Oh, so everyone's hitting quota. Okay, not everyone's hitting quota. Okay, what are the consequences of that? The consequences are blah, 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 blah. Okay, we'll speak to you next quarter. Okay, no worries. And I just go, don't care, no worries, because my pipeline from all the content marketing that we do and the outreach that I do, the pipeline is so full that I don't care. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Inevitably, before that next quarter, 8 weeks from now, I get a panicked phone call of, we need you to come in and give us a hand because we're struggling. And so they've understood where they are, their current reality. They've seen the bigger, brighter, bolder future reality that we've talked about in that initial call. I've explained that maybe not, but maybe I can help them get from one side to the other. It's worth investigating further. And at that point, they go, well, I can probably do this myself, which is a common objection, the DIY objection, which we can dive into if you like. That's an element of the status quo. But they go, I could probably do this myself. But if they could do it themselves, they wouldn't be in the situation they find themselves in. And so it just takes a little bit of time for their own pressure internally to build up, where then they're throwing money at me to come in and try to solve the problem. But now you're 8 weeks behind where we could have been if you just got started. So I'm laissez-faire about some of this in my own business over at salesman.com because there's just so much inbound, and the small amount of outbound that I do is very effective because it's been refined and tuned over the years. But for most salespeople, if you've not got that laissez-faire attitude, it's because you've not got enough pipeline. And sometimes you just have to let people stew in it for a little bit, or the disaster can happen. That then becomes the trigger event where money is found very quickly, deals are closed very quickly, and what would have been a 12-month buying process otherwise becomes a 3-week one.
The DIY method, talk to us about that, because I can see how that can definitely impact status quo, and where they feel, I've done that before, where I'm like, I can change my own oil in my car. And then I start this bad boy, and I'm like, I don't want to do this. It took too much time. Talk to me about that.
You as a business owner, it's a terrible use of your time to be doing it, unless it's a classic car and you love just fiddling around with it. Different value from that. But for your daily driver, it's a complete waste of most people's time. Yeah. So the DIY objection typically comes because of previous communication from the salesperson. So what we want is to have the buyer in what we call the buying zone. One side of the buy zone is where we oversimplify the implementation of the product or service, because we're trying to make it sound easy. We'll come on to this. We're trying to reduce the perceived cost of implementation. We're trying to make it go, oh yeah, work with us, 30 days later, you'll have all these problems solved. When you simplify it, you put it into the buyer's mind that, hey, I might be able to just do this myself. If it's so simple, I'll just watch a podcast, read a book, or I'll hire the person for an hour of consulting, rather than have them come in and do this transformation. So that's one side of the buying zone. The other side of the buying zone is another element of status quo that the listeners will have found themselves in, which is where you overcomplicate the implementation and you overcomplicate the value that's being delivered. On that side, the buyer then just panics because they are then second guessing if even you as the expert can get this done. So what you need to do is be in that Goldilocks zone in between the two, where it's simple enough for the buyer to understand, but it's complex enough where they go, I don't have the expertise or I don't have the time to implement this myself. So from a ROI perspective, it's absolutely worth taking my Audi to the garage to get the oil number.
Yeah, there's no way. And I tried that. It was like, I think it was in college when I did it. And I was like, I'm not doing this again. That's too much. So much time. The perceived, you kind of talked about this where it ties to that DIY, the idea of reducing the perceived cost. Let's go deeper into that one, Will, because I think there's a lot to unpack from it. That perceived cost.
I'll give you a diagram that perhaps visualizes this. You can put in the show notes if you like. But if you imagine a chart, we are progressing from one side of the chart to the other, and that's time. On the other, there is pain and pleasure. Mm-hmm. The buyer is in a level of pain right now. Otherwise, they wouldn't be communicating with you. So this is coming after your discovery call, after perhaps a demo, presentation, whatever it is. You know that the buyer has the budget authority. They're the person who can get this deal done. But they're stuck. Why they're stuck is most likely because there is a level of pain and they know the reduction in pain that they will get from working with you. So the current reality, the future reality, bigger, brighter, bolder future reality. They know that if they work with you, they're going to reduce their pain by 3 points, 5 points, whatever that number may be. But to start working with you, and this is something that salespeople often aren't involved with in the buying journey. This is where we give up we get the deal done and we just sod off onto the next one. To get that reduction in pain or that increase in value and pleasure, there's a level of pain that the buyer has to go through to implement the product, the service, to make that change. And this happens subtly throughout the sales process. They've got to get buy-in. They've got to go to procurement. They've got to help the procurement team or their own internal team understand what's going on. So there's subtle pain that goes throughout the buying journey. But typically, there is then a decent amount of pain to get the product implemented. If you're changing CRMs, it doesn't, and you're a medium to larger size organization, it doesn't matter what the benefits of that new CRM are. There's going to be some headaches for weeks, months. Maybe the headaches never end. That's part of the risk of that change. So our job as salespeople is the increase in opportunity, increase in value. We want to increase the perceived value of that, and we want to decrease the perceived cost of that implementation or the perceived cost of change. We do that by asking questions. We do that by educating the buyer, helping them understand that gap is probably not as big as what they might think it is. Or we build trust that if there is a big gap, for example, going from Salesforce to HubSpot or whatever way around the buyer is going, that we are there to help them, or our team can solve those problems, or we're going to introduce them to someone technical in the organization, so we're not just going to drop them in it. And once we get them over that hump, then it makes total sense to move forward with the rest of the deal. But that perceived cost of change or that perceived cost of implementation, buyers rarely communicate that with the salesperson. And so it's our job to uncover what it is, what the person feels about it, and then trying to reduce it.
How do you bring that up? Imagine a lot of young folks are probably watching, young sellers are watching this, and they might think, well, I don't want to be that pushy salesperson. But how do you effectively bring that up?
Sure, it's not pushy at all. You are genuinely trying to understand the buyer's situation. So if it's, say it's sales trade, let's say that someone wants to implement our Seller Made Simple process and they're using Sandal. You mentioned Sandal earlier on. Sandal are great. They're making a change for whatever reason. There's other things that they're trying to line up. Yeah. Well, I would proactively say, hey, this is going to be a bit of a pain in the ass. We have to do this, this, and this. Here are the steps. We have to educate the team. We've got to shift perhaps how things are labeled in the CRM. Perhaps we need to eliminate 3 or 4 steps of the Sandler process because we want to simplify it and round it up. It's probably going to take this amount of time, this amount of energy. These people need to be involved. Essentially, we're doing at a high level without doing the work. We're doing a little bit of project management. So then the person goes, okay, now you've clarified this. It's going to take us a week to implement, but then a quarter from now, we're going to increase revenue by 25%, if everything goes to plan. That then becomes a real strong, logical next step for that person to move forward. When things are ambiguous and they're all over the place, it's all a bit wishy-washy, it's very easy for people's emotions to get tied into the deal then. And they go, well, I don't really feel like doing that. We want to remove as much feeling as possible. We want to make it logical to work with us. Yes, it makes sense to do this. And at that point, again, you're not being pushy. You're genuinely trying to help the buyer understand. Because at some point, the perceived cost of change might not be perceived. It might be such an arduous task, in which case you go, okay, I don't think you're a good fit to work with us. The juice is not going to be worth the squeeze on this occasion. I'm here for you in the future, kind of thing. But yeah, most of the time that's not going to be the case, because we're only having these conversations later on down the buying journey. But that's what we're trying to achieve.
I love it. Some very good ideas with that. And the third component that we want to get at, because this is so good so far. We understand the problem. We got into what is exactly the status quo, and then we got into reducing that perceived cost, which I think is a really huge meat part of this, but increasing the perceived value. And I know you started doing that with the diagram, but as a seller, how can you go deeper into that? Or even as a, how can I be better at doing that component, increasing that perceived value from it?
Cool. So the perceived value, the best way I know to explain this is what we've kind of been alluding to. I call it the reality gap method.
Yeah.
Really understanding where someone is, really understanding where someone wants to get to. The future reality, the current reality, the future reality. And so the value that you deliver is a calculation of both of those. How much pain are they in right now? Can you help them not artificially increase that, but can you help them understand the actual consequences of not taking action? The sunk cost of staying where they are. Can you help them understand that if they just do nothing, they're moving backwards and the market is always moving forward? Can you help them understand that their job might be on the line if they don't get this sorted? Can you help them understand then the inverse of this, of if you do get this fixed, promotions are on the table. You can talk about it from an individual perspective, a company perspective, and a market perspective. You might get a promotion, the company's going to do well, and hopefully you've got some shares or some kind of tangible benefits of the company doing well. And if you're dealing with leadership, they probably do, right? They'll have some kind of stock or share incentive scheme. And from the market perspective, this is the company, but at longer term. If you help them have success in the marketplace, hopefully, this is, it's against most Western cultures, Western countries. They have laws to stop this, but if you can help them become a monopoly, their job is even more secure. The company's even more secure. So if you can help nudge one of those three spheres of pleasure in the right direction, then you are building this gap between, you're increasing the gap between the current reality, where it's horrible, it's painful, it's whatever, the future reality. And the bigger this gap is, the more urgency there is to get across it, because the rewards are so great that then there is less and less status quo, like an inverse to the amount of urgency that's been created.
Do you, I love this idea. Do you have any other examples of how you've done this with someone, anyone that you worked with, where they went from they saw, you helped them to see it and what the future could look like, and they were able to make that change? I always love to hear success stories.
3 hours ago, I was working with a management consultant. I won't say who it is, because he or she may end up consuming this content, right? So I'll keep it somewhat broad.
Hope you partner with Will.
Fancy management consultant. They're in New York City.
Sure.
And they do, I won't say what they do, but they do a lot of what would be the fancy management consultant way of describing it. Like they are change agents. They will come in and when a company is struggling to change things around. I can't say anything more specific. I've gone down the thread now, Donald. So I've got to continue down the thread. But I'm trying not to kind of out the person. But they jumped on a call with me a couple of days ago. Hey, Will, we need to do this, this, and this. Okay, great. Well, we can help you with all that. Does it make sense to get started? Well, what about this? Well, okay, well, we can help you with that in this way. What about that? Or we might be able to help you in that way. And so then it got to the point where they were going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Then there's a few emails, and then another call, and it was becoming a bit of a mess. And it's like it's like 80 grand. So it's a decent sized deal for me, but it's not something that I will spend the next quarter faffing around over.
Sure.
So jumped on a call, and I was like, okay, let's just be straight with each other. What are you trying to achieve? And then we started going down the rabbit hole of, if we don't get a few more deals in this quarter, we're going to have to let some staff go. And this is the founder of the company. So now we're talking. And he did not want to communicate this with me earlier on, because he thought I was going to try and sell him, which is part of the problem that all salespeople have, right? So you want to position this as, I'm here as a genuine, and this is cliche, but genuine consultant to help you move down your buying journey. I'm not here to get you and just force you like headfirst down my sales process. That's when you're doing complex deals, that just doesn't work. If you're doing business to consumer, if you're selling some just trash, maybe that could work, right? But if you're selling complex products to sophisticated people where there are actual cash problems, businesses on the line, then you need to help them down their own buying journey. You need to help them make those decisions and move forward. So we've jumped on. Going to have to let some of the team go. Okay, well, what's the time frame for that? Time frame for that is, I think it was like the beginning of next year. So, okay, how long is the average deal size? How long is the average deal length? 12 weeks. Okay, so we need to start now before, otherwise, inevitably, you're going to have to let people go, which you don't want to do. So then it was just reconfirming the situation that the chap is in. What's the consequences of this? What happens if you don't do this? What happens if you don't progress? And there's no manipulation or influence. It's the open-ended questions. He could easily have turned around to me and said, yeah, nothing's going to happen. In which case I might poke a bit further. And if that's the case, okay, no worries. You get cracking. Come back to me in 12 weeks when inevitably it all falls apart. But that wasn't the case. So down and down and down. So then to increase the perceived upside of it, it is, well, what happens if this is a success? Well, we'll get to keep the team. Okay, well, forget about that for the moment. What happens if we can actually drive some more revenue? You're thinking right now, you're in panic mode. You just want the team to survive because he's been working for like 15, 20 years. And they're all very local as well. So you don't really want to sack someone who's like lives 3 doors down from you because you're going to see them every day and they're probably going to throw a brick through your window. So that was, he didn't say that obviously, but that's genuinely, he would be seeing these people every day. He cares about them. So I was like, okay, well, if we get a few more deals in, what would that mean for the team? Oh, I'd be able to give them a good Christmas bonus and they deserve it. Okay, great. So see how we're pulling down here and we're pushing up here. Yeah. We're just trying to understand the situation. We're dragging them apart. And then he signed up on the call and then we had a consulting call straight after. And there was just one or two quick wins. It wasn't a big deal. And progress was made immediately. But it was getting that switch of, yes, let's move forward. He knew he needed to do it. He knew he only wanted to work with me. He wasn't interviewing other sales trainers or anything like that. It was just, I almost needed a bit of a kick in the ass to get over the line, to get things done. But you can't give people that kick in the ass. You've got to let them come to that realization themselves. Otherwise, they feel pushed. They feel manipulated. You're going to end up people asking for refunds. They're going to have buyer's remorse. You want them to go, okay, this makes sense. This makes logical sense to move to that next step. Love it.
Well, you masterfully outlined this to us today. Status quo. Nobody should be sitting in the status quo after this conversation now. Clearly outlining this stuff. And obviously, it was so great. I mean, we hit our 20-minute mark, and obviously people can go a little bit deeper with this. You do have a pod, and I know you cover a lot of great content like this as well. Can you tell us a little bit more about the podcast for a sec?
Everything I do, the podcast, the books, is all available over at salesman.com. I used to do interviews. I no longer do interviews. Interviews may come back at some point, but yeah, if you're listening to this in a year's time from now, you're probably listening to me and Donald on the salesman.com podcast. If you're listening to this immediately as this episode airs, you're probably listening to me ramble on and my thoughts and feelings about some of this stuff.
Well, awesome. And if folks want to get in touch with you, salesman.com.
Yep. Everything I do is available for free. All the content I've ever produced, everything that I know about what we're talking about today is essentially one of the chapters from Sell Made Simple, chapters from Sell Made Simple. All I charge people for is implementation. So if you can download the books, get this done yourself, amazing, get stuck in, make a bunch of money. If you need some help with the implementation, you'll find a way to contact me.
Genius. Well, we absolutely love it. We're so excited to have you here and for the content you shared with us, man. So thanks so much, Will, for being here.
Cheers, Donald. I appreciate it, mate.
Hey, that was Will Barron. If you want to find out more information about him, you can find all the details, Salesman. You can Sales Made Simple. We have links down in the show notes. And you can check out his podcast, Salesman Podcast. We have all the details, again, right in the show notes, so you can check him out. We appreciate that. Will, thanks for coming on the show. As always, we want you to thrive and succeed. And if you're looking to improve your sales game, check out our new mastermind that's starting up, thesalesevangelist.com/mastermind. Or you can go check out our LinkedIn prospecting course. thesalesevangelist.com/LinkedIn. Would love to have you join those two programs. Find all the details in the show notes. As always, apply these things. We want to see you improve. We want you to raise your level of thinking. But most importantly, we want you to go out and do big things. See you on the next one.